Keir Starmer's investment summit this week was less a triumphant leap forward and more a recycled greatest hits of the previous government, rebranded with a shiny new Labour label. Before I get started, I have a favour to ask. If you enjoy the video, please give it a like, comment, and even consider subscribing. It all helps to grow our community. Thank you, and on to the video. Starmer confidently announced billions in inward investment, but much of it had already been secured by the outgoing Tory government. His so-called shock and awe strategy felt more like reheating leftovers than serving up a bold new recipe for Britain's economic future.
Where I once pursued a fleeting ambition to play the flute.
It's as if Starmer walked into the room, played a few notes on the flute, and expected us to believe he'd orchestrated the whole symphony, when in reality the Tories had already written the score. Take the much-trumpeted £1 billion DP World investment, for instance. Starmer paraded this as a major win for his administration, conveniently glossing over the fact that the groundwork for this deal had already been laid under the Conservatives. It's a bit like claiming credit for baking a cake when all you did was take it out of the oven. Let's not forget, it was Labour that almost torpedoed the DP World deal in the first place. Transport Secretary Louise Hay went full throttle, calling for a boycott of P&O ferries after their disgraceful mass firing of nearly 800 workers. Sure, standing up for workers is crucial, but telling everyone to boycott the company you're about to rely on for a $1 billion investment? That's a political facepalm if there ever was one. Hay's boycott call nearly cost the UK a huge deal for the London Gateway port, forcing Starmer to swoop in like a firefighter, putting out a blaze his own team started. It's like Labour wanted to have its cake and eat it too, criticising corporate misdeeds while still hoping to cash their £1 billion cheque. And that £20 billion investment from Australia's Macquarie Group, that's another one already well in motion, predating Labour's takeover. Starmer's innovative strategy seemed to involve showing up, nodding approvingly at deals his predecessors had lined up, and then cutting some red tape to please corporate giants. He's like a substitute teacher arriving halfway through class, scribbling his name on the board and declaring he taught the whole lesson.
Artificial intelligence.
Hang on a minute, did you just say artificial intelligence? But didn't you just cancel £1.3 billion in AI investment? Labour, you can't call AI the future and then turn around and give it the cold shoulder. It's like inviting someone to a party, then locking the door and turning off the lights when they show up.
The last government made a few people less sure about, needlessly insulting our closest allies.
It's a bit rich for Starmer to call out the Conservatives for straining relationships with allies while having David Lammy as Foreign Secretary. Lammy, known for his fiery comments, has openly criticised figures like Donald Trump, calling him a racist and misogynist, and even implying Trump was a threat to UK relations. It's a classic case of do as I say, not as I do, with Labour throwing shade at Tory diplomacy while their own top diplomat isn't exactly handing out olive branches.
Determined for this country to be the highest growing economy in the G7.
Starmer boasting about wanting the UK to be the highest growing economy in the G7 is a bit of a head-scratcher, considering it already was before he took office. The UK held that title during the pandemic recovery phase, so his grand ambition comes off as more of a PR stunt than a fresh economic vision. It's like showing up at a race after the finish line and claiming you're about to win. Experts are now warning that growth is unlikely to be sustained into the second half of the year. I wonder why that could be. Any ideas, Keir Starmer? Do you think it might have something to do with your government's ridiculous warnings about the state of the UK economy and your crazy tax plans scaring investors away?
Growth. But without growth, growth is higher wages. Growth is a more vibrant high street. Growth is to growth. But growth leads growth for growth. Growth for growth. Regulation. Growth. Pro-growth. Better growth model. On growth.
Starmer can talk about growth all he wants, but it's hard to see how that's going to happen with plans like a capital gains tax hike looming. Slapping higher taxes on investments discourages the very entrepreneurship and innovation needed to drive the economy forward. It's like trying to fuel a fire by pouring water on it. If he's serious about growth, he might want to reconsider piling on burdens that risk slowing down investment and stalling the very economic expansion he's promising.
I don't see regulation as good or bad. That seems simplistic to me. Some regulation is life-saving.
Labour's approach to regulation is starting to look a bit like a chicken and egg situation. On the one hand, they're talking about slashing red tape to spur economic growth, while on the other, they're rolling out brand new rules, making sure every backyard chicken has its paperwork in order. So, while big corporations can look forward to fewer regulations, small-time poultry keepers are left wondering if their hens need a passport next. It seems Labour's idea of cutting bureaucracy doesn't extend to the coup. His talk of ripping up regulations in the name of growth rings eerily similar to the Tory playbook, just with less flair and a more palatable veneer of stability. The result? Starmer looks more like a caretaker for old Tory projects than the leader of a new economic revolution. If this summit was supposed to convince us of Labour's fresh approach to the economy, it mostly just showed that the previous government left the scaffolding up and Starmer's team is just giving it a quick coat of paint. Britain's investors might be happy, but the rest of us? We've seen this episode before, and it wasn't great the first time around.